Welcome to the ValuePros Show, where Value Pros get value ready. Hi, this is Bruce Scheer. In today's episode, we're diving into an essential topic for every professional looking to make a powerful first and last impression. Why and how to be credibility ready. I'm joined today with Mike Wilkinson, author of several books on selling and pricing based on value, and an absolute world-class trainer. I always admire Mike's superpower, which I say is making the complex things simple, and only true masters in my mind truly have this ability, and Mike's one of them. We'll explore the key elements of presenting yourself as a trustworthy and competent value professional in our increasingly digital world. From mastering your online presence to nailing those crucial first impressions, we've got you covered. So let's get started and elevate your credibility game. Hey Mike, I'm super excited about our topic today. It's why be credibility ready. And this comes as part of an overall framework that we put together called Being Value Ready. And we've got a value ready assessment that's sitting off of our website now. If you go to valuepros.io under resources, you'll have a full assessment across the 10 dimensions of what it means to be value ready, showing up instead of like a typical sales rep, showing up as a value professional. But Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much, Bruce. It's good to be with you again.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And what an exciting topic. Mike, you and I know we love to typically kick it off with the big why before we get into the what and how and when. What's the why behind this whole thing? Why be credibility ready? You were telling me, Mike, that you like to challenge people around this whole notion. Could you mention that to me and our audience?
Yeah, I do like to challenge people. I wonder how often people even give a thought to the impression that they're going to give when they go in to see a customer or client. So I do an exercise with them very often where I say to them, just imagine for a minute that you've just come out of one of your key clients, and I go in immediately after you and I say to that client, just describe the person you've just seen in 3 adjectives. And I say to the sales guys, what are the adjectives you would like the customer to choose to describe you? And, I have some amazing answers. Very occasionally, I'll have some good ones. But often people say, I'd like them to think that I was nice and I was friendly. And I say, is that it? I said, how is just being nice and friendly going to differentiate you from everybody else? How about being slightly provocative, inquisitive, demanding, challenging? Those are much better adjectives to describe ideally what you would like to be seen as, I would suggest. But then the other thing is, if you don't think about how you want to, or what impression you want to create, you can't plan how you're going to do it. And I know that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today, because being credibility ready and leaving that lasting impression is so important.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And just to frame this a little bit, being credibility ready, that's one of our 10 dimensions, but there's 3 key dimensions for building trust. One is being credibility ready. Secondly, it's being client ready. And then thirdly, it's narrative ready. And then for the audience that's listening and watching, and you can swing back and watch our other episodes around client ready and narrative ready. But those are 3 key drivers or dimensions of capability, competence that value professionals need to have. So on credibility ready, you couldn't be more right, Mike. And some of the big impressions that we're trying to get, we want to just get into the game. And like you said, that first impression, people form impressions in just seconds. And even though you might speak for a long time, or they might have more time in interacting with you, that initial impression happens in seconds. And that's probably what we'll talk about mostly in this episode. I know we can't talk forever and people have schedules to keep. And I thank everyone for being here to witness all this. But we'll cover some of the key big rocks that you just need to nail to show up credibility ready. And some of those impressions, Mike, that you talk about for building trust, we want to be trustworthy as an impression. We want to be credible as an impression, 2 key dimensions. And then thirdly, of course, relevant as well.
I just think that in the nicest possible way, Bruce, in a relative sea of mediocrity out there, how are you going to stand out in a positive and a constructive way?
You've got it. And that's what we've got to do, especially in this market and the competitive dynamics on most deals. You really need to stand apart in the sales experience. And all 10 of our dimensions allow you to do that. But credibility, it starts with credibility. That is job one. So let's turn the corner and talk about how to be credibility ready. So Mike, I'll take us through and we'll just talk about it a little bit in terms of how do we get into this whole notion of being credibility ready. And I'll go ahead and talk about the first thing. And it's just more what I see day in and day out. I call these credibility ready blind spots. And you've already mentioned, Mike, that the first impression is so darn important. I would add to that the first impression is very often the last impression, especially when that impression doesn't foster thoughts of trustworthiness and credibility and relevance. You're out. You have a few seconds to establish it. And if you don't, that's it. And very often it is the last impression. You don't get too many at-bats, especially when you're dealing with senior buyers, decision makers, executives. Time is precious, and you don't get second and third chances. You got one shot, and that shot occurs in seconds is the big point.
Absolutely. I think if you make a poor first impression, you've got an uphill task right from the get-go.
Yep. Well, yeah. Hey, darn, I just got interrupted. I got to run. My apologies. We'll have to reschedule. And that never happens. So, I don't know if you remember, the iPhones even used to have an app to have it call you so you could get out of uncomfortable situations. My wife and I were laughing about that recently, but very often, darn, I've got to run. And you blew the first impression and never to meet again. So that's sad, and that's what we're trying to counter against. The other key point here, Mike, that I witness, and I experienced myself, I will confess I've made most of the mistakes that we'll talk about today. And the reason for that, Mike, I wasn't taught. This wasn't, my grade school curriculum didn't have it, my junior high, my high school, college, no. Showing up credibility ready. These are things that thank goodness the pandemic really forced a lot of science behind this. How do we show up credibility ready? And we'll talk about some of that. But yeah, you're not taught this in school.
Indeed not.
All right. Well, but as you said, Mike, when you do show up credibility ready, you get a chance to stand apart from the pack. And the fun part here is it's easy to do. Most sellers don't show up credibility ready. You see so many mistakes. And after this episode, I hope everybody on the line is going to agree. You can't unhear and unsee some of the things we'll be talking about today. And when you get it right, oh man, you can really stand apart from the competitive pack.
No, I absolutely agree. There are some fairly fundamental things that I know that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, I want to quiz you just for fun and quiz our audience. So if you could envision with me as I speak this through, how would these images that I'm going to put into your mind, how do they relate to your digital credibility? And I want to double down on digital credibility because we live in this modern digital world, and most of your digital footprint, LinkedIn, on web meetings, etc., we're really communicating digitally these days. And these images talk about that a little bit, or at least I want them to jar your thinking a little bit. So I'm talking about a bonsai tree as an image, a Japanese bonsai tree, a street performer that has an audience around them, and then a mission control room with lots of different screens, etc. If you could envision Apollo 13 or a rocket ship launch in the mission control room, lots of complexity going on. So anyways, those are the three images that I'm talking about with you that you should be envisioning. A bonsai tree, a street performer with an audience around them, and a mission control room. What would these three images have to do with your digital credibility? Mike, any thoughts there?
Hey, you got me beat there, Bruce. Interesting choice. What is the difference between a bonsai tree and a mission control person? That's interesting.
And a street performer. Yeah, what in the heck do these images have to do with digital credibility? Well, I'll jump to the chase here. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to ponder this in their minds a little bit. Bonsai tree, Japanese bonsai tree, street performer, mission control. Here's the big reveal. So if you think about a bonsai tree, they're grown over years and they're small and intricate. There's so much detail. But the big thing about a bonsai tree, and my brother was growing bonsai trees and really loving it, but you have to carefully curate and manage all the details so it grows the way you want it to. And it manifests into this really intricate, beautiful little plant, if you would, a little tree. And as that relates to your digital credibility, you need to pay attention to those details and curate it over time. Secondly, as the audience engagement part of the street performer, some of the best street performers I've seen, Venice Beach or around the world, oh gosh, over there in London, Mike, the square there where you always have the buskers there, some of the best ones, they bring in audience engagement. They make sure there's lots of interaction and variety, and that creates more stimulation. And we need to do that in this digital world to minimize multitasking and people checking out. We need to drive engagement as part of that credibility. And then thirdly, the mission control room, that image. Hey, a lot of this can get fairly complex, especially when you try using all the fancy tricks. For people that are listening to this show, I encourage you to go to our YouTube channel, just at ValuePros Show, and subscribe to our show, please. But you'll see some of the fanciful things that we're doing as we record the show to make it more visually appealing. That extra layer of tech can create complexity. But as it relates to digital credibility, you need to nail that tech and make sure it works for you for a pleasing experience versus a horrible experience, which it can be if it's not managed right. And just like a mission control room, you're watching the tech and make sure everything works. Well, hey, Mike, did this map to what you were thinking about?
Well, it did, in fairness, Bruce, since I already knew what we were going to be talking about.
Okay, all right. It
is a great way of getting the message across. And there are those three key elements to it. And I think sometimes people either just show up and wing it, which is not a great idea. Managing the details is so important, making sure you've got everything right. Audience engagement, more than anything else, is the critical component. Yeah, I think most audiences, if you got them engaged, they will forgive some of the misdemeanors, if you like.
That's
Having
true.
them engaged, yeah, it is the killer.
Yeah.
I've seen lots of problems with complexity and things going wrong in Zoom and Teams and all sorts of other things. So, yeah, I think we're all familiar with those.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and sometimes painfully too familiar. Well, on that topic, so I attended an event in Las Vegas this last January. It's called CES. And one of the seminal leaders in the space of AI, his name's Shelley Palmer, was giving a talk. And I literally went to that venue and I snuck in, Mike. And luckily, I'm not locked up anymore, but I did sneak in and I wanted to be front row and I wanted to check out Shelley Palmer and his talk because his content is just absolutely king in the world of AI and in this fast-changing, moving space. So I'm thinking, okay, gosh, my opportunity to go sit at the feet of the guy who just knows this stuff inside out. So I get in there. And he starts to speak, and our ears started to hurt, and especially mine. Audio is so important to me, but the audio was bouncing around in this room, and it sounded like he was speaking into a tin can. And I don't know what happened. I gotta believe there was the sound team set up and did some testing or what have you, but something was horribly wrong and just sounded so bad. And I turn to the people next to me and go, hey, can you hear him? And they're, oh. And we're all kind of struggling with the whole deal here. And I struggled for, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute longer. Then I just made the decision, I'm out. So I got up and left. I wasn't going to do 45 minutes with this guru trying to figure out what he was saying as the sound waves were just bouncing all over the place. And after that, I did some research on that, just like,
may I interrupt? Did
Yeah.
he notice?
I don't know. He didn't call it out. He did. The show just went rambling on, and I went rambling right on out of there. It was so sad.
If we go back to what you said early days, which is that the first impression is the last impression, think about the impression that he gave. You start off with a great optimistic view of what you're going to hear, and 45 seconds later, you're leaving.
Yeah, and I won't be back. No chance. Because that also, his credibility, trustworthiness, et cetera, that was shot. And I'm not going to go out of my way to go see him again. That ain't going to happen. I don't want to get burned again. So, but the research I did on that, Mike, was what I discovered was this quote that I just absolutely love. But the quote is, content is king, and then I would add, for correctness, or queen, and context is the throne. You need both. It can't just all be about great content. And you talked about forgiveness, but sadly, I didn't forgive Shelley. I got up and split. That was the last impression, and you don't get more at-bats. And that's sadly how the world works, but it does work that way. So what I wanted to do, Mike, is really kind of help people nail the throne. Before we move forward, any observations on your side?
Yeah, no. I just think it is so important. It's something that people don't think about enough. Just getting all of the little things right and getting it all together.
Yeah. So I'll move through, and these might seem like little things to everybody, but these little things, these details matter, is the big point I'd like everybody to think about. And making that first impression that's made in seconds, these little details, they really matter. So the first detail I'd like to talk about comes in the form of a story. And during the pandemic, my kids flew my coop, and they were in their 20s, and they moved down to LA, Santa Monica. They wanted to be on the beach, and they wanted to be Hollywood stars, et cetera. So they were out. And my wife was sitting at home, missing them dearly, and saying, hey, hon, we need to go see them. And I'm like, just going, okay, that's going to be really expensive. Flying down, renting $300-$400 hotel rooms, and trying to keep her connected to the kids. And so I got this wild idea, hey, I'll buy a travel trailer and we'll drag it down there and stay on the beach and enjoy ourselves. And there's lots of options for doing that down in LA. It's actually really cool. So anyways, one of my favorite clients, her name's Angela, she set up a meeting for me with another executive who had just joined the organization, $10 billion company, NetApp. And I'm excited. I'm like going, oh, great. A new executive, new buying center. This is going to be lovely. And my champion at the time, she put a lot of weight and she trusted me, et cetera, and wanted to make that happen. I was so grateful. So anyways, my wife and I, we pull into this RV place where we're going to be staying. And it's on the beach. And I'm thinking, hey, beach of LA, there'll be internet down there. I'll be set. So we get down there, get set up. I get ready to get into the meeting. And the internet is just total crap, just really bad. And so we start the meeting on the bad internet on Zoom. And just sadly, it's kind of going in and out. And then I have to go off video to try to get some bandwidth to support that bad internet. Meanwhile, Angela's texting me, just going, Bruce, what's going on? And I text back, Angela, I'm so sorry. I got set up for this meeting, and lo and behold, bad internet. I don't know why the coverage isn't good here. It should be great. My full apologies. And what she wrote back to me, Mike, was, Bruce, that's so unlike you. And I'm telling you, you've probably heard of kari in Japan. If I would have had a sword, that was probably it. I would have fallen on it, and failure was not an option. And I felt so bad about that. So my internet bill went from like $50 a month at that point in time upwards to $500 a month, because I got satellite internet. I got T-Mobile as a second mobile hotspot at any point in time. And then I had Verizon and AT&T. So just I had it all. I wasn't, for that whole season when we were traveling, I wasn't going to have bad internet again. I just couldn't do it. But I'll never forget that. But as part of these details that we're talking about, internet's job one. You got to nail that.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you get the gig?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I've been forgiven, but Yeah, as you said, but that wasn't the first impression. It was for that executive, and thank goodness there was a little bit of sympathy and empathy on their side. But you don't want to count on that. You don't want to bank on that, for sure. Again, very often you only get one chance. So the big details here, Mike, that I want to push into a little bit, but internet's really critical. The second one I'd say in importance is audio. You got to nail audio. And another quick story, I was telling another client, he was on the executive team of a company called Domo out of Utah in the business intelligence space. And I was telling him my story about how things went wrong with Angela, and I had bad internet, and because of that, everything was wrong. And he started thinking about it. He goes, Bruce, gosh, because we talked about audio a little bit. And he goes, we had a CEO meet with our exco a few weeks back, and they were shortlisted. They were in the top 3 vendor list that the exco had to meet with before to choose one of these suppliers. And these were going to be $1 million contracts for us. So it needed the exco's vote on which vendor to choose. And he goes, it's funny that you talk about this, Bruce, because in this instance, one of the CEOs of one of the vendors decided to take the call with us from an airport. And after the call, we just talked about it. Okay, he's dinged. That company's not going forward with us. And he goes, and funny enough, I think the reason is it was probably bad audio. And I'm like just going, oh my God, it's so interesting that you say that. This gentleman's name was Chris, but it's so interesting that you say that, Chris, because very often audio isn't really noticed. There's been some USC studies, a bunch of them that are just fascinating, but they've had scenarios where you have people on stage and there's good audio and then bad audio. And what they've found is when you have bad audio, very often the believability and credibility of the speaker goes way down. I saw one stat goes down by 19%, but it can just be a huge driver of the loss of your credibility.
I was going to say, the quality of the audio is what actually drove you out of the meeting you described earlier in the first place.
Yeah, and you literally... Can you imagine the team of that vendor, of that CEO, and all the energy they went into to be in the top 3 vendor category, and for the CEO to take that call from an airport with bad audio, bad internet, bad everything probably. I'm sure he's probably using a laptop, and just the whole thing crashes. They're off the list. But it's one quote that I really love. I don't know if I've coined it, but I would say that audio is like air. I don't know if you've heard that phrase before, Mike. It's like air. You don't really notice air until it's really good. You're walking in a forest and it smells really good. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is lovely. Or it's really bad. Oh, it's smoky. It must be wood burning, smog. And audio is the same way. You don't notice it until it's either really good. Hopefully our audience thinks this audio is good, but it's really good. Or it's really bad. If it's mediocre, or if it's kind of poor, you don't really notice it. You do notice it subconsciously, but you don't notice it in your conscious mind. But that subconscious is also making an assessment. And there's YouTube studies as well about bad audio and bad internet, bad bit rate, if you would. And people jump out of videos early. They don't watch it all the way through. And when they're asked why, very often they're saying it just wasn't engaging. It wasn't entertaining. It's bad content. But they've got data to prove that when they boost that audio and the bitrate quality, people stick around. So it wasn't because it's bad content and that assessment. People subconsciously are making an assessment, but consciously they're not really aware. But you got to nail it. It's so critical. One tool for people, if anybody's a geek listening and watching this show, there's a tool called Adobe Podcast. And if you go to podcast.adobe.com/enhance, you could take a clip of your Zoom audio and just a short clip, say it's you speaking for 15 seconds. And then you can upload it into podcast.adobe.com/enhance. And it'll turn it into studio quality. The fun part is they have this little toggle switch so you can hear what you sound like naturally, and then what it would sound like if you got a fancy studio microphone like I'm speaking to you with today. And that contrast, check that out. It might propel you to invest a little bit of money. And you can bump up your audio tremendously by getting off your laptop audio, getting into a headset. I personally don't like to wear headsets because I want people to see my whole face. But you can get that, or you can get like a $50 USB mic, or you can get something more fanciful like I have. But I'll tell you, audio is just critical after internet.
I think audio is absolutely fundamentally important, but I love the Adobe classic ad there. Free.
Yeah.
Free.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Seconds. It's free for 15 seconds, and then you have to pay.
No, but it's a great tool for that compare and contrast. So just to prove to yourself, hey, I got to up my game. The next thing we could talk about, Mike, is just the camera that you use. I've got a fancy DSLR camera, but you can get a very nice webcam 4K. I just ordered one the other day. It's kind of an AI cam that'll follow me around the room. It's kind of cool. I like to whiteboard for people, and it'll follow me in doing that. And it looks almost DSLR standard. It's shocking how good that is. But I'd encourage everybody to get off your laptop camera and invest a little bit of money. And that camera I was just talking about, that looks fantastic. I think I bought it for $179, a little bit less because I bought it used on Amazon. But oh my gosh, really amazing quality that you can get.
What was that? What have you got then, Bruce? What'd you check?
The what again, Mike?
And what'd you check, or is it something else?
No, it's called an OBSBot Tiny 2. Yeah, and it'll probably be out of date in 1 month. It's hot off the press. It's pretty interesting technology. Mike, the next thing we could talk about is lighting. You wouldn't believe how often people show up and they're dark. Their face is dark. And automatically, subconsciously, can I trust this guy? Why is he hiding in the shadows? What's going on? So that you really need to light yourself. And people mess this up so often. I see it almost daily. But they'll have a natural light behind them, a window, and they'll be looking at their screen. And it just makes their face dark. So that natural light just messes up the camera, whatever camera they happen to have. And they show up shadowy and dark. It's horrible. So I'd encourage everybody listening and watching, if you have natural light in the room, go ahead and face it if you can. Try to figure out a way to do that. Or like I have these light blocking shades. So if I'm on a meeting or doing recording or things like that, I have these light blocking shades. I get rid of the natural light, and then I have fancy lights in front of me. Fancy, I say, but the price of it was maybe $250. So anybody watching this video now, you'll see what it's doing for my face. It lights it up. I'm not shadowy, etc. But that's an investment. When I want to be top of the game, you don't have to be. I see other people just getting lamps and putting it in front, especially if the company doesn't pay for these types of things. There's things you can do in your environment. Make sure you show up and it's not all shadowy. You got to come out of hiding for sure.
Absolutely. One thing you should be doing is checking it. I mean, if you're on a Zoom call or a Teams call, you can see yourself, and what you're seeing is what they're seeing. So are you happy with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Too true. Well, one of the other key components I would say is your background. And it's pretty fun. I've got a lot of studies around the importance of background and what background you should have. And again, like I said before, you're not taught this stuff in school. Just thankfully, I'm kind of fixated on this topic. So I've done a ton of research in this area, and I've found some wonderful studies. One was done, it's a global study with just this huge population sample size. Another study was done by Dr. Carmen Simon, who I just love, out of Stanford. And both of the studies kind of checked and balanced each of them and came up with a similar finding. But Mike, a quiz for our audience to think about. Which background wins in trustworthiness? How would you set up the background behind you when you're in your web meetings? So the options would be you have plants behind you. The second option would be a bookshelf behind you. The third option would just be your home with stuff behind you, a couch and photos and dining room table, maybe a bed. I've seen that a lot too, which is a little odd. Wow, you're taking me into your bedroom. And a blank background, just a wall that's painted but nothing there, or a novelty background, or what a lot of people call a virtual background in the Zoom world. So out of those 6 options, how do you think they score, Mike? And our audience, what's the big takeaway? I know you've seen some of this. I don't know if you remember the study, Mike. But
as the man with the library bookshelf behind him, I've got to knock on the head straight away. The novelty background, it just is a nightmare. And some of the others are a bit strange, but yeah, I'm going for the bookshelf.
Well, yeah, if you're trying to drive your trustworthiness, the data says the plant that I talked about the plant and the book are really close. And I do see people these days having both. They'll have a bookshelf with a plant there. But weirdly enough, a plant creates a calmness to it. And that takes some tension down and makes you more trustworthy. It's amazing. The biggest trustworthy factor, though, is a bookshelf, especially if it's not cluttered and messed up. It's tidy and nice. That bookshelf really scores well. And then
all I'd say to our audience, for those of you who can actually see this, if you add Bruce's background and my background together, we have the perfect solution.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, talk about credible and trustworthy. Yeah, big time. Then the third one, which is really interesting for trustworthiness, would be a blurred background. So the big takeaway, and the novelty or virtual background scores quite low on the continuum. It's the lowest score across multiple studies. So if you're still using virtual backgrounds, I know they were super popular in the pandemic. Everybody had them and you laugh about them. And you might be on a spaceship, ha ha, he he. But in this day and age, it hurts your trustworthiness and your credibility in a big way. And these data points are almost the same across trustworthiness as an impression and then credibility as an impression. With credibility, weirdly, the blurred background is a little bit less and the blank background's even higher. But the plant and the bookshelf still win the day in terms of being credible and trustworthy. So big takeaway for everybody, please move to a natural background and clean it up. Don't make it cluttered and just simplify whatever you're doing. The other day I met with a guy, he had so many different things and he had a story to tell for every single thing. But the problem is it's distracting. People start to pay attention to the background versus you. So, but go with natural if you want to be the most credible and trustworthy self you can be, and think about a plant and or a bookshelf in the background.
I shall get a plant, Bruce. You must get yourself a bookshelf.
Yeah, absolutely. And then here's another fun thing as it relates to trustworthy and credibility. How do you think a smile impacts things, Mike?
I think smiling is so important. I really do. And it's, again, something you can give a smile away for nothing. It costs you nothing, Bruce.
Well, but you gain so much. And the science says it takes those data points that I was showing before, and it just takes that whole scale up. So if you smile, man, your credibility and trustworthiness just go up, and fairly dramatically. So it's huge. But there's different types of smiles that I've learned through my research. There's kind of a little teeny pursed lip type of smile. There's another smile that people have coined the Pan Am smile. And Pan Am used to be a big airline that went out of business. But that smile shows teeth, but you can tell it's not really a genuine, heartfelt smile. It's a feigned smile. And one of the big reasons, because the eyes don't have wrinkles. But when you have, it's called a Duchenne smile, named after a scientist out of France. But the Duchenne smile shows the creases in the eyes where you're truly smiling, you're joyful. And that smile is huge as it impacts people and as it relates to your credibility and trustworthiness. So note to self, it's a good thing to smile, but smile with your eyes and with your mouth, not just with your mouth is the big point.
Yeah. And I think making it genuine is the most important bit. A sort of wild grin is It's not going to.
Yeah, you don't want to come across as being the Joker. That gets a little scary. But yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, makes sense, Mike. Mike, the other thing is, how do you position yourself on the screen? So for people listening to us, if you think of your Zoom screen kind of like a box, if you cut that box in thirds from top to bottom, so think about 3 rows, a third in the middle and a third on the bottom, a third on the top. Your eye line should be on the upper third. And for the viewing audience, they can see this with my eyes on the upper third line. Between the upper third line and the top of that box, my eyes are right on that. And then if you think of a golf ball between your head and the top of the box, that's how to position yourself. So your head should be touching the golf ball, and then your eyes should be right on that upper third. And when you have it set that way, then you know how close to get to the screen or how far away. Because I do see some people, their face is covering the whole box. Sometimes there is part of their head is even above the box, and they're just showing their eyes, and it looks kind of scary. And then sometimes I see really little heads, and everybody's kind of away. So try to get your eyes on that upper third and your head touching the golf ball between the top of the screen and your top of your hair or head. And then use that as a way to position and get your head size right and your body in the shot. So that's one really important tip. Just how do you place yourself in that box? And then the other thing is you want that camera at eye level. And so there's different ways to do that. If you're fancy like me, you can have a tripod with your camera on it right perfectly at the eye level. And I even use a teleprompter so I can look people in the eyes so that my camera's right behind my teleprompter. But you don't have to do that. You can just get a habit of looking at the camera versus looking at the screen. Try to look directly at the camera. And then you can even take books and prop up your laptop or PC, whatever you're using, but try to prop that, whatever device that has holding the camera, prop that up so that camera's at eye level. Because at the end of the day, you want to look at your prospect eye to eye, your buyer eye to eye. And it's simple, but very often I do see people, I can imagine that CEO that took that call from the airport didn't prop up his laptop. It was probably sitting on a table and he's looking down upon an exco. How does that look? Especially if you have nose hairs and stuff. It's not a good look.
I've seen early days of the pandemic. I think I saw up more people's noses and more bedroom ceilings than I've ever seen before.
Yeah. Well, you would think we've come out of the pandemic, but Mike, I still see this stuff on a daily basis. On a daily basis. This isn't abnormal. It's the norm. And I think a lot of people have actually just accepted it as normal. The big points that we're making here is you want to be abnormal and you want the gold medal. You want to be at the top. You want to win your deals and be credible, trustworthy, and relevant. You got to nail the throne. And that's what we're saying here. All these details matter. Another one, Mike, is just, you talked about engagement being critical. Using the person's name. If you do that, is so helpful. Science proves that if you use somebody's names, they love it and they'll pay attention. So you and I have been doing that with each other this whole meeting, probably subconsciously, but we're calling each other by name and just making sure we're seen and we're heard. And that name is just an ultimate sign of respect and care, and it's lovely. So you use people's names.
Well, they do say that people hearing their own names is music to their ears.
Yeah, beautiful quote. Nice. Another one, Mike, is the attire you wear, how you show up for your meeting. How do you want to dress for your audience? And it's kind of fun, Mike. I've got a son in his 20s, and he's like, "Oh, hey, Dad, I think I just want to have my long hair down." And I'm like going, "Hey, man, you be you. You can be authentic to yourself. How do you want to show up? What's your personal brand?" But I was just encouraging him, just be conscious. What signal are you sending? And is that trustworthy? Is it credible? Is it relevant in your buyer's eyes? How do you want to appear? And since we've had that dialogue, he's cut his hair and he also does a bun behind, and he's showing up as clean shaven and doing a great job, in my opinion. But it is, how do you want to show up? The beautiful thing about Zoom is who cares what's going on downstairs, unless you are standing up and whiteboarding like me, which most don't. So, you can do you on a party down below, but a professional on top, as the value pros you are. So just think about that. How do you want to appear? What's the signal you're sending? All right. Well, hey, those are some of the key things as it relates to web meetings, and it'll impact your calls and everything, how you're showing up. I wanted to talk about one more big topic here as a credibility point, and that would be LinkedIn, Mike. I do see a lot of people on LinkedIn kind of missing the opportunity to be credible, trustworthy, and relevant to their buyers as they show up on LinkedIn. So a few key details there. Your LinkedIn profile photo. What's that look like? Is it AI generated? Oh no. Is that trustworthy? Or is it an avatar, or is it you? And are you well lit? Is there a clean background? Just how are you showing up in that profile photo? Can you get a proper one? And because again, that is your face, that first impression. Are you worthy to talk to? And when I'm reaching out to my target buyers, I can see, I've got a LinkedIn premium account. I can see that they check my profile. Or Mike, when we launched this show, I could see all these people when I made the announcement. Thousands of people are aware of it now. But I'm also seeing a ton of people running in to look at my profile. And some of them even know me. But I know that it's kind of like they're curious, and it's a credibility check. And so how are we showing up there? Are we truly credible and trustworthy? But that photo is just critical. That's probably the most critical piece. And then
absolute horror photographs out there. People treat LinkedIn like it's Facebook. I mean, we've got pictures of people hang gliding or on holiday in their swimwear. It is a business networking site, and I think it is important to be appropriate. I completely agree.
Well, again, you want to be buyer-centric in your thought about this. So your photo, would your buyer appreciate that? Your title. Unless you're a CEO, co-founder, board member, best-selling author, what have you, what's the title? What's the signal on that? For a lot of people, if you say you're a sales representative, many buyers, especially if you're doing your cold outreach, they might go, oh no, this guy's a seller, I don't want to meet. But can you shift that to a title that might be more relevant? I'm a partner to revenue leaders, helping them grow revenue, or whatever is the right frame. Can you frame your title in a way that's buyer-centric versus you-centric per se? How would that land with them? Because they do look at that. And then next probably would be your about section. Many sellers, an expert in LinkedIn was telling me the other day that many sellers, their about section is more about their achievements because they're trying to get their next gig. And they're treating their LinkedIn profile like a resume, and which is natural and normal. And again, you're not taught this stuff in school. But I would encourage you, if you want to sell to buyers, and those buyers are coming onto LinkedIn to see if you're worthy of returning a phone call or responding to the email you left for them, they might want to do a little safety check themselves. They come in and they see your about section, and it's not about them, it's about you. That you might lose a point there. You might not get that call back or response. They'll move on. Next, I'd say posts that you have, are they buyer-centric? Are they relevant to buyers, your target buyers, your target audience? Your featured section, if you have one, have you featured assets that they would appreciate seeing and that would buy you some credibility in their eyes? Anything else, Mike, that you would add?
I absolutely go with all of those. I think the title particularly is important. Account manager, account director, whatever it is. Well, so that's pretty boring. I think the format I quite like is your name and then helping who do what.
Yeah.
I think the point you make is that your LinkedIn profile, there is a tendency for it to be about you when it really should be about that, especially in that about section. What do you do for people? How do you help them? What issues do you help them to resolve?
Absolutely.
So a bit about you is fine. We're talking about credibility. So a bit about you is fine, but I think just being me all the way through it.
Yeah, that about section, I would encourage our audience that's listening and watching, definitely check out our episode on being narrative ready as one of those value ready dimensions. Because once you have your sales narrative or your sales story that has the buyer as the hero, that's one of the key principles. You can use that content in your about section, and then it'll land really well. It'll be all about that hero, your buyer, and the problem they face, the outcome you promise, and then the solution you deliver as in the context of their narrative, what the world's going to look like with your solution in their world. And then a final point, Mike, I would say in thinking about LinkedIn profiles, think mobile first. Many buyers look at sellers' profiles from their mobile phone where they're processing email, what have you. They happen to have a minute, they're out and about, they're on LinkedIn, gives them the opportunity to look off their phone. And how's your banner, for example? If it has words on it, how's that showing up on mobile? Is it appropriate? So definitely think mobile first as you're thinking about that profile and how it shows up, especially your banner.
Yeah, completely agree. And you can check all that out by just having a look at your profile on your mobile phone and see what it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, kind of to bring this home, I know we could just talk about so many different things, especially you queued up how do you engage with people as part of your credibility. We won't go there. I just wanted to get some of these fundamentals, again, back to that point of the first impression is often the last impression, and that first impression is formulated in just a few split seconds. So the things that we've talked about will help you come across as credible, trustworthy, and relevant within those first few critical seconds, giving you the right to have a meeting and have those follow-on conversations and close more deals more often.
Completely agree. And as you said earlier on, for me, what is important, the detail does matter.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for this discussion. I hope everybody enjoys it.
Cheers, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.
And that wraps up another episode of the ValuePros Show. I'm Bruce Scheer, and I hope you found today's discussion on being credibility ready valuable for your professional journey. Remember, in a world where first impressions are often made digitally, paying attention to the details can make all the difference in how you are perceived. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the ValuePros Show on YouTube or on your favorite podcast player, and check out our Value Ready assessment at valuepros.io under the Resources tab. Until next time, keep focusing on those critical elements that make you stand out as a true value professional. Thanks for watching and listening.